A warm welcome to all of you. I know this time is difficult for the Greek part and it's midnight there. I will start with inviting Peter to introduce Hélène Cardona.
Hélène is a supremely multilingual and multinational creator and artist in so many fields. Born in Paris of a Greek mother and a Spanish father, she was raised all over Europe and is a citizen of the United States, France, and Spain, and she spends time in each of those countries as well as in Greece. She studied English philology and literature at Cambridge, England, where she obtained a translation diploma from the Royal Society of Arts. She studied Spanish philology and literature at the international universities of Santander and Baeza, Spain, and German at the Goethe Institute in Bremen, Germany, and Paris. She attended Hamilton College in New York, where she also taught French and Spanish, and the Sorbonne in Paris, where she wrote her thesis on Henry James for her MA in American literature. She worked as a translator and interpreter for the Canadian Embassy in Paris. It was in Paris, Hélène, yes. Correct? Yeah, yes. Right. And has taught in various places in France and the US, in addition to working as a French language expert for arbitration. But her skills and her talents don't stop there. She's a graduate of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, and she's known for her acting roles in the films Chocolat, The 100-Foot Journey, Star Trek Discovery, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, World War Z, Serendipity, and more. Last but not least, she's also an award-winning poet and literary translator, and she's a dream analyst. She has over 20 awards and honors to her credit, including a Hemingway grant and the Independent Press and International Book Awards. The 7 books she's published include 3 bilingual poetry collections. Describing her own work, Hélène says, "I write as a form of self-expression, fulfillment, transcendence, and healing, to transmute pain and experience into beauty." American poet and literary critic John Ashbery wrote the following about her poetry collection, Life in Suspension, La Vie Suspendue. "Dappled with transparent imagery, like the Mediterranean sunlight she grew up with, Hélène Cardona's poems offer a vivid self-portrait as scholar, seer, and muse." And in her review of the same collection, Vasiliki describes it as one of the most imaginative poetic manifestations of unconditional love and grace. There, the reader dons a piece of white sail wrapped like second skin and sets off in an ecstatic hovering over an infinite space made of stars and waves. This is a seamless universe, as it is exactly a child's poetic imagination that allows for the reenactment of an oceanic feeling of bliss. The act of the rocking of a cradle activated here transforms a painful experience of loss into a constant transfusion of life, fueled by love and light. And David Mason, poet laureate of Colorado, describes her work as liminal, mystical, and otherworldly. This is a poet who writes in a rare light. Hélène, bienvenue, bienvenida, καλωσορίσατε. Welcome.
Merci, merci beaucoup. Evharisto Parapoli. I am incredibly thankful to be here with you, and thank you so much for this very warm welcome. As you know, imitera mu Elinida, and so I really grew up I was born in Paris because my mother had left Greece. She had studied law in Greece, and then she had left Greece for postgraduate studies in France at the University of Nancy. And that's where she met my dad, who, so my father's from Spain. He was born on the island of Ibiza. And he had to leave Spain because of Franco's dictatorship, because of his writings. And he had translated, for instance, Stendhal, Le Rouge et le Noir, The Red and the Black. And I mean, he was going to be arrested, and he got tipped off. And so he left Spain, and he was also doing postgraduate studies at the University of Nancy. I was born in Paris, and we moved very shortly afterwards. I was 1 month old, actually. We moved to Geneva, Switzerland. And so I grew up surrounded by the mountains. We first lived in the city and then outside of Geneva at the foot of the mountains. And I loved it, as a child. And I went to the music conservatory in Geneva in Switzerland and studied ballet and the piano and graduated with a second prize. So I was very infused by music and dance and nature and animals. I had a dog. I had two. And so my poetry really is very rooted in all of this. And I picked up German already when as a child in Switzerland. My parents had German friends, and I wanted to learn it. And, in Switzerland, everything is written in 3 languages: French, German, and Italian. In terms of, what inspires me a lot, I draw a lot from music and from nature. It's like they're meditations, and when I was playing the piano, I didn't have the words for it at the time, but I entered, a place that was, outside of space and time in a way. And we moved back to Paris. And I would go, since I was a child, study in England. I was an Anglophile early on. And after we moved back to Paris, I was 14 at the time. The French system is selection through mathematics. Science is what's most important, considered most important there. And so I was very good at math. Actually, I excelled at math as a child. It was just a game for me. And naturally, I went into the scientific section and got a scientific baccalaureate. I could still, I had Latin since I was very young, and I kept studying Spanish and English. And but the focus was on mathematics, physics, and chemistry. And of course, when you graduate from there, it's like you're not going to, the pressure is to continue in those fields. And my Greek grandfather, was a doctor. And my dad also was very keen on me being a doctor. And so at 17, I found myself in medical school. And after 2 years of that, I had a terrible depression. It was just not for me. The system didn't suit me at all. I had a breakdown. And it actually was a very, very deeply spiritual experience for me, because I got in touch with something else, something that I that was not part of my consciousness in a way, like I wasn't conscious of it. And I could say that I was pretty much an atheist until then, not that I'm religious now, but I have this connection, very strong spiritual connection to something bigger than me. And that experience, where I actually was very close to death, is really something that has stayed with me ever since, And so I decided that I would really do what nourishes me, because there was pressure still to get an education in terms of academics. I wanted to be an actor then, but I studied literature because I loved it. And I would do some theater on the side with the English department of the Sorbonne until I got my master's. And the theme of my master's was the search for fulfillment in Henry James's novel, The Wings of the Dove. It was just, for me, I came to the realization that I had to fulfill myself. And I had started my PhD and just really, it was like now or never, you know, and I left for New York. And ever since, so I left for New York to pursue acting, and I attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which is one of the oldest drama school in the US, and have and focused there for a while. But I had been writing poetry since I was 10. And so I was still writing poetry, but I wasn't really doing much with it. And now really I have learned, I have merged all my different selves, you know. So I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I'm a translator, I'm a teacher, I'm a dreamer, I do dream work. And so it's just wonderful to finally have all my different selves like come together, you know, and and to form a whole, basically. So, and in a way it happened, even though the beginnings were brutal, it ended evolving in an organic way, because when I was in New York, I studied with a wonderful coach, Sandra Seacat, and she's the one who introduced me to dream work, to help build or define a character that I'm working on by asking for a dream about the character. And so I continued that dream work, where basically you work with your subconscious to find answers. So it's very therapeutic. And at the same time, I can use the dreams. You know, a lot of my poetry comes from my dreams. And my love of animals and medicine came in a different way into my life, came back in a different way into my life, because I was very interested in shamanic studies. And so that's very interesting for Catherine Streisig, because when I was in New York at the Actors Studio, one of my coaches did a workshop in Santa Fe. And that's the first time I went there to do this workshop. And I loved it. And I felt this really deep connection with the Native American culture, its relationship to nature and animals. And so ever since, I've been going to New Mexico and to Santa Fe, and I've spent a lot of time there. And so shamanism, and for me, you know, we're all connected, we're all one, right? So humans and animals and nature. So I've kept that connection and the healing aspect of not just through the dream work, but through the writing, through the poetry, which is really to transmute, you know, pain and experience into beauty, to just create something. You create art out of it, and that's really what the shaman does, right? You heal yourself, and then you can heal others. And so that's the journey in a way. And translation comes into it as well, because I was always, you know, growing up automatically translating from one language to another, because at home there was Spanish and Greek and French. and we were going to Spain and Greece, you know, for holidays, and then I was going to Germany and England and Wales. And so translation is really a part of everyone's life. When we think or see anything or express ourselves, we translate everything into thoughts, right? So there's an immediate process of translation. But by translating also other poets and authors, this is a way to bridge cultures. And that's what I think is wonderful about it. Like we wouldn't have access to other poets and writers if it wasn't, you know, from different cultures, if it wasn't for translation. And so it's a way also to know yourself and to know where you're from and your roots. And it's also a way to have empathy and understand other culture and people who are different from yourself, because then you don't see the others as others, right? You just there should be no fear of the others. You should see how similar we are, even in our differences. So for me, it all comes together that way as well. So I've translated French poets. I've translated my father, who's also a poet, in 2008, the government of Ibiza published an anthology of his work called El Bosque de Burnham Wood, which I translated into English, and which is, a collection of poems from different collections that he had published earlier on about his love, for his native land, being part of the diaspora, and also it has a political element. Therefore, the title Burnham Wood, in terms of the reference to Macbeth, because of what Spanish people had to endure during Franco's dictatorship. So all of that really has affected me in terms of I don't write anything overtly political, but I think it's always there, underneath. I mean, Greece had a terrible dictatorship with the colonels, and many of my mother's friends were tortured. Vasilis Vasilikos, who wrote Z, who was a friend of my mother's. So we have this history in Europe where we had to live, or our family members did through dictatorships. So I think it's a more acute awareness of what goes on, like even in the US, right, when things happen and democracy's in danger. So for me, I think everything comes together, and the acting is a beautiful way to express myself, both in front of the camera and as a voice actor as well, because I love recording voices for movies and shows, like animal voices and all kinds as well. So in a nutshell, that's my background. If you want, I can read the poem, Life is the title poem of Life in Suspension, which is my history until I first came to the US. Life in Suspension. Let me introduce myself. I'm the memory collector, your companion and spirit guide. Let's unwind the clock, peel the past. The reflections you give me, conjure, surrender from within, I throw into the fire, the cauldron of resolutions. They burn into embers and flickers that evolve into butterflies. They flutter away, heal and free you of all chains, so they can revisit and reinvent who you are. Let the dance begin. I'm in my mother's womb in Paris. She's scared. I want to get out. I'm 3 years old in Terracina, Italy, sharing a room with 4 girls. My grandfather visits from Greece. He holds my brother on his lap and says, "A boy at last. I'm not impressed with girls." I'm 4 years old in Monte Carlo. My mother takes me to school. A pigeon poops on my scarf. She reassures. It brings good luck. I'm 5 years old in Karben, Germany. It's St. Nicholas Day, my birthday. Marie-Louise feeds me Lebkuchen, Stollen, and Pfeffernussen. They taste like heaven. I'm 6 years old in ballet class in Geneva, breaking my point shoes. The Russian master ingrains in me the correlation between pleasure and pain. And I know the 2 centers sit next to each other in the brain. I'm 7 years old in the Swiss Alps, making snowmen, skiing, hunting for Easter eggs. My mother laughs, then says, "Your father can't be left alone." I'm 8 years old in the Jura mountain, in love with my dog, playing chess with my dad. I'm ecstatic. I'm 9 years old. My grandmother takes me to the market in Tarragona to buy the bitter and pungent quince she craves. I'm 10 years old. My cousin drowns me in the beautiful blue waters of the Spanish Mediterranean because I threw sand at him. My head hits the hard bottom. All the air's gone from my lungs. My last thought is, no one knows I'm here. I'm 11 years old. My mother makes jam with apricots, strawberries, peaches, and plums. She's filled the house with the intoxicating scent of gardenias. My brother throws another temper tantrum. I'm 12 years old in math class, mad with laughter. I'm 13 years old. The Music Conservatory in Geneva is sheer magic, an enchanted world I inhabit alone, the key to my soul. My piano teacher has so much faith in me. I'm 14 years old, in between worlds. My aunt married a fascist. He grabs me by the throat. It's the middle of the night. It's loud. I can't sleep. I'm 15 years old, in northern Wales, riding a fabulous horse along stunning steep cliffs, racing him to full gallop in bewitching Celtic wind, relinquishing cravings in the dust. I'm 16 years old, off to San Diego. My mother cries at the Paris airport. She breaks my heart, but the pull is stronger. I'm learning to let go, trust the ripeness of the moment, that everything happens at the right time, to appreciate what I have. I'm connected to my bones, filled with the richness and texture of space, uplifted, vibrating, reverberating. I become the sound of Tibetan bells, echoing and hovering in the cosmos. I perceive the whole world below, life in suspension. And so I also wanted to say that I'm named after my maternal Greek grandmother. My name is Hélène and her name was Eleni, obviously. So I carry that within me. I'm going to, so a lot of the poems in my collections, both Life in Suspension and Dreaming My Animal Selves are dedicated to my mother. I wrote a lot after she passed away suddenly. And so it was a tremendous shock. And it took me a while to make something of the poems and I created these collections. So this is a poem dedicated to her. And it's called To Kitty Who Loved the Sea and Somerset Mom, and it has an epigraph by E.E. Cummins. For whatever we lose, like a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. To Kitty, who loved the sea and Somerset Mom, the angel who smells of my childhood, my mother, piano and oboe, whose face the icon reflects, auburn hair like a Modigliani, eyes the color of rain, light caught by surprise, whose presence the absence reveals, whose laughter burns snow, whose warm breath I breathed this morning as I woke, the scent of gardenias whispering, I never left you. And this is really how I feel, is that she's always there. Gardenias were her favorite flowers. And so one night, she came to me in a dream as the Celtic goddess, Ceridwen. And then I wrote a poem about it. My mother, Ceridwen. The light on the icon, the way I see her in my dreams, the core of her at the edge of darkness, in a magic cauldron, always full, never exhausted, that brings her back to life. Guarded by a golden serpent, coiled in the shape of an egg, the world snake marshalling inner reserves, the seed of a new journey, a glimpse of a mysterious and elusive woman crowned with morning glories. This is how she lands on the page, slanted, looking out in space, integrated within me, save the blue sky across her face. I have another poem also that takes me back to my childhood, and Vasiliki you did say something really interesting about, the strong connection to, I think childhood for me was in many ways a very enchanted time because of where I lived. and the magical connection to nature and music and dance. And it was really a magical world to be in for a while. And this is called From the Heart with Grace. Wind, who yearns to be savored, offers me 3 cups overflowing with eternity, daemon of insight. The opportune encounter enraptures quintessential distress, ruffles a strange quietude, kindles a jeu d'esprit, glückliche Reise, propels the fervent fragrance of heliotrope, hyacinth, and honeysuckle. The tremulous hibiscus taunts me to warm climates, reminds me I remain a thistle, resilient, rooted in Mediterranean Celtic fringe. Do you remember a language older than time? When a shiver down my mother's spine was worth 1,000 words, and the melancholy in my father's eyes, reflecting Lake Geneva, was indecipherable. There, unbeknownst to me, in a world inhabited by swans, I too swim in concentric circles to find the resonance of my core and discover that in dreaming lies the healing of earth. In dreaming, we travel to a place where all is forgiven. In dreaming is the divine created. And the great oneness whispers ex voto, I am centaur by any other name. I am griffin by any other name. I am mermaid by any other name. Ma raison d'être, insubstantial, chameleon, excavated like a talisman from wreckage, resplendent at fresco, catapulted beyond whimsical, metamorphic frontiers. So my name in Spanish, Cardona, means thistle. And the thistle is also a symbol of Scotland. So I found that really interesting. And the swan is also an animal that is a recurring theme in the sense that Lake Geneva, is full of swans. And then my father was nicknamed El Cisne Vallisoletano, which means the swan from Valladolid, in the sense that they considered his writing, like, how they say that in Spain, a certain kind of writing comes from a certain place, just like in France, they used to say as well that the region of Touraine had also a great writing came from there. And I think, anyway, that's like, he was defined by that in a way. But I have had my grandmother also come visit me in a dream, and with Spanish words as well. And sometimes it's a scent, and sometimes it's music. So there's a poem that I woke one day with this music. I just wish I was like able to transcribe it, and that just didn't happen. Night messenger. I wake in a meadow braided with wild grasses and flowers. Notes of music drift from a harp. A penguin is running. I follow to the river. He lays on a leaf, lets the current carry him, and says, "This stream is your life. Instead of watching from the meadow, flow with its rhythm." Guided by Scottish pipes, I reach the gate between my past and the waterway. Like the penguin, I lay on a leaf. Let the river transport me, knowing I've entered another world. I'm going to read a poem that is dedicated to a Greek goddess. It's called Dreamer. Ah, to get a glimpse of Aphrodite and be touched by grace, see beauty everywhere, forgive all in myself, and surrender, surrender, surrender. Ah, to get another chance at love, for I worshipped Athena and followed Artemis. Taste the cypress pomegranate, dive into the ocean, have your heart broken. Consider this, be fortunate, grateful. Consider this, be alive, for the greatest gift is given with death. There is no end and no beginning. Surrender, surrender, surrender. I pay with my mother's death for the price of my dreams. As I dream the world into being, as I dream new memories, as I dream myself into love falling into you. Ah, to let Aphrodite guide you to the great spirit who proclaims again and again, mountains am I, rivers am I, wind, sand, and rain am I, moon, sun, and stars am I. Her voice will not be silenced, for it is formidable and echoes those of all beloved. It is her privilege to serve you, for like seeks beauty and complexity. Will you perceive with the eyes of the heart, heed the call of the jaguar and hummingbird? Let the wheel of time absorb you. Have your heart broken. And I wrote this poem just about the time I met John, my partner, who's also a poet. And so sometimes there is this synchronicity, right, in life where you are meant to meet, some people in your life. I think everybody actually that enters your life plays a role, and some are meant to stay longer than others. But I think everything serves a purpose. So here's a poem. That's the poem that Olympia Dukakis quoted from when I asked her for a quote for the book, for a blurb. It's called Galactic Architect. From the bottom rung of a ladder in the sky, I hang in the void. Ultramarine is all I need. Let it be simple. Build a cottage for the spirit to rest and soar. I trust, self-contained, in equipoise, resources at my fingertips, deep-rooted ghosts supporting the foundation of a throne, to explore and claim whole worlds, surprised to find you here with me, lighting up my life. Growing up, I was also, I think, one of the things that made my childhood, I think, magical was that I just read so many fairy tales, right? The French ones from Perrault, and German ones, Grimm, and Russian ones with Baba Yaga. And I was really like so infused by that universe. I think I just could spend days on end, reading them. And then, of course, we grew up with poetry in France and in Europe in general. It's really part of our life. Here is one that has, this one is called Galahad. I took the sword and laid on the bed and said, I'm walking away. Riding horses in the rain, I bless the past. All dragons become sublime fragments of life, artwork. A chance encounter in the woods, delicate, potent and violent. The dream, a gift of healing. Oh, I am Galahad and don't need to search. He carries the falcon on his arm, aims straight for the heart, hits precisely in the center, and leaves me between tears and ecstasy. I scrutinize waves for answers. They raise themselves like ghosts. Dolphins jump out of clouds, guide me among whales through incessant oceans of transformation. Galahad's eyes raining over me. Falcon returns and says, fly with me. Let the wind claim you. This poem has an epigraph by Hart Crane, who's a poet I love. Stars scribble in our eyes, the frosty sagas, the glowing cantos of an vanquished space. A mind like lightning. Without gravity, I fly into 1,000 pieces. Add sparkle to various reflections, fallen stars, colliding lights, transform particles, waves, and dark matter. I become ocean, mercury, silver shimmers, fairy tales, fascinated. The strangeness of this atmosphere seduces, shifts consciousness, shapes bloodstreams, provokes a rush. Let the next dimension pull you. Lightning mind, prosperous poet, dualist without a fight. Let the lake talk, embrace it. And that is a poem that came from a dream where I had a couple of images, but then I engaged with them, and in what we call active imagination, where you have a dream and then you just, ask questions to. So this is how I look at dreams, right? It's partly Jungian and partly shamanic. So from the Jungian approach, I look at everything, in my life as an aspect of who I am. And I think that's true for everyone. And so in the dream, every element of the dream is a part of who I am, a part of who you are. And you can have a conversation with it. You can have a dialogue with it. And nightmares, for instance, are there to help you. It's just not easy because it's not pleasant to revisit nightmares. Like for me and for everyone, I think the first reaction is to just get away from it and not, want to remember it. But an element, something in your life wants to draw your attention. And if you don't become conscious of it, it'll come visit you in a dream as a nightmare to get your attention. And I'm not talking about because there's all kinds of different dreams, like the bad dreams you may have because of having eaten like heavy food, right? That's like different. But so let's say there's a figure that is threatening or an animal that is, attacking you. You do want to face them because it's like facing your fear. And by engaging with it, you find out that actually that figure or that animal really is not going to attack you. It just wants something from you, an acknowledgement, for instance, or something like that. And so it's also interesting for me to connect how certain dreams will come at certain times in your life where they will echo something that happened in the past as well. And because it's being revisited in a different way. So like the one Dreaming My Animal Selves, both collections, but they really are very, very inspired by dreams. This is one, again, that was also a dream that I turned into a poem. And it has an epigraph by another poet I love, H.D., which is, when my soul turned round, perceiving the other side of everything. And it's called Pathway to Gifts. Whispers wake me. I return home behind a procession of swans to an island in the heart of Paris. On the cliffs, where the wild ones come to show themselves, I sing this whistling song. Look at the other side of the world, as if a deck of cards spread out to peek under and flip over for a glimpse at the hidden side. the dream opens forgotten realms of creation. I think that's what time is. So when I met John, who's my partner and who's a beautiful poet as well, we also had this connection that I had lost my mother young, and his father had passed away even younger. And so this is a poem dedicated to him and to his father. Notes from last night. To John, in memory of his father. One can distinguish Van Gogh from Chagall, that state of in-betweenness where even objects seem alive, to do with light and looking pure. Because of all this light, I am partially blind. It doesn't matter whose ghost you see, as long as you see one. Two darknesses together across the shape of face. Warmth comes forward, cool retreats. I just experience. Talk about faith, I don't believe. Experience is cellular. In our normal state, we're not able to perceive. That's why I think the dead know. I had never before seen the beauty of it. Everything has to do with light. Every ghost, proof of the afterlight. Any ghost. And this, was a poem that came together. It was a mixture of looking at paintings. I had met this poet, this painter, Dan Bacardi, after doing Chocolat, and that's I met Leslie Caron on the movie, and we stayed in touch. And she invited me to the premiere of Le Divorce here in Los Angeles. And so we were there and we met this painter, Dan Bacardi, this artist. And John and I ended sitting for him. Leslie had, and a lot of writers sat for him. John ended using one of his paintings for the cover of his poetry collection, The Mind. And so it was, looking at different paintings and letting the light affect me, basically, because what happens if you look at, I think, anything for a while, you start seeing an aura of sorts, but then in order to see, you need to not see. It's very interesting what happens with sight, right? So this poem came from that, and a discussion I had with John, about ghosts and how I always wanted to see one. And I wanted my mother to visit. I missed her terribly, and that never happened. She's only come to me in dreams. But one day I was invited somewhere at a lady's house that I did not know. It was the first time I met her. She had a house in Malibu, overlooking the ocean, but high up in the mountains. And I was facing, I was looking at her, but I was looking out. So I was facing the light, and there was a lot of light coming in. And then all of a sudden I saw her. It's the first time I saw what I would call a ghost, because I have no other words for it. But on her shoulder was this face, this head. And then I described it to her, and I said, does this resonate? And it was her mother, and she had never seen her. And it was this strange way of seeing where all of a sudden it was very real, but it's not really there, right? And it's the only time that I had such a strange experience with seeing something like that. And it did not pertain to me. It was not like anyone I knew. This poem came out because when you miss someone, you do want to find a connection, right? And so, but the ghost came a different way. And so I put it in this poem that way. The poem I'm looking for is in this book. It's called Spellbound. And again, it has some of the fairy tale in it and shamanism. fall asleep at the lake tonight. No boundaries, like a fairy. I am the eagle song, a calling, light defying gravity, someone to steal horses with, a case of mistaken identity, tears transforming into fish in the air, a force that propels forward, proclaims who I am, with a passport from God. Her will, an explosion, with bullets for words. I offer you everything. Stardust, silence, impish grace, and flutes like birdsong, mischievous, good and bad, pulled out of myself into the spell. I ask the unthinkable, move so fast, breathless, delicate craftsmanship. I walk on all fours, elongated, neither human nor animal, a creature you only see in magic. I'm going to share a poem of my father's from the collection of his work that I have translated. I have translated a few collection his, which is Burnham Wood, and a beautiful French poet, Gabriel Arnaud-Jacques, Beyond Elsewhere, which is also a very spiritual, long narrative poem. And Dorian Locke's, whom I translated into French this time with Éditions du Cygne in Paris. I also translated Walt Whitman into French, his war writings, which had never been translated into French. And that was done for the University of Iowa with Christopher Merrill and Ed Folsom. And they wrote also, and there were a lot of texts. They wrote prefaces and afterwards of the translations and the texts. It was letters that he had written. It was poems that he had written. And during the war, he worked the Civil War in the United States. He worked as a kind of a nurse. You know, he was helping the wounded on both sides, actually. And he was writing letters to the family members of the soldiers on behalf of the soldiers, you know, which was very healing to them. And it was extremely moving to work on these translations, because a war is horrible, really. And when a country hasn't had a war in a long time, it seems a lot of people seem to forget the horrors of it. And it was really heartbreaking to read these texts and to translate them. But they were, I mean, they're very beautiful and they're very powerful. The poem I'm going to read is from Burnham Wood, and it's actually a poem that my father wrote in memory of one of his brothers. He one of my uncles, my father had two brothers, died fairly young. I knew him, and when I was a child, and I loved spending time with him and his wife, my aunt Josefina, and he was a mariner. So it's called Ode to a Young Mariner, to my brother Manuel. The sea is a bride with open arms, with stout rubber balls for breasts. It is difficult to refuse her caress, dry from the lips her brackish aftertaste, forget her sweet bitterness. Underneath her waters wails a rosary of dead centaurs, watchmen of the shadows. Handsome men, hard as anchors, torn from the chest of a barbarian god. It is difficult to refuse the call of the sea, cover one's ears, grasp the neck with both hands, and become suddenly mute, or pluck out one's eyes and feed them to the fish, to ignore the gulls and red masts and so many pennants, and the ships arriving from unknown countries, and the ships departing from others, barely known, or perhaps for hours. Because we carry within like a blue keel or masts and spars, the marine bitterness of kelp, the stripes on the back of fishes, the tarry death, and our initials written in the sea. The sea of mariners, your bride, brother moving away to the bridge, like one more piece of our island. You know the smell of death because you tread beneath a cemetery that can be yours, and you go brightly. You know how the sea smells of life, how at times she spits a ferocious foam, how she wails wide and rises like an atavistic being, a primitive creature. We all carry death within, written in furrows, like a name traced by the keel of your boat in the sea. We are all sailors of a sleeping bride with round breasts. I don't want to depart for the land, to sprout like a eucalyptus branch, my eyes blinded by grass. Wait for me, brother, when you anchor your vessel in the sea you've loved. No need to depart so alone, mariner, brother of a seaman gripped by the earth's open jaws. So my mother was born in Thessaloniki, and her mother's family was from there. Her father's family, my maternal grandfather, was from Crete. And so an island, Ibiza, an island, and the Mediterranean is so important, I think, to, Spain and Greece. France has a portion of it. But I have this connection to the sea and to the ocean, and the need to be near it. In Geneva, it was a lake. When we lived there, it was mostly mountains. And New York, I lived in New York 8-9 years before moving to Santa Monica. Manhattan is an island too, surrounded by water as well. And so I feel very strongly connection to that, and I love being around it. I find it has a very healing influence on me, and I love the mountains too, of course. But yeah.
I love the gifts of your poetry, Hélène. It's like a spellbound. In one of your poems, Spellbound, you said no boundaries, like a fairy tale. I felt like the whole reading was like that for me, very healing, very enchanting. And I feel like everybody must have felt the same. So I'd like to hear from them if you want. What do you think, Peter?
I just want to underscore some of the themes that really struck me and that resonated very much for me. Nature, reminiscence, the mythical, the surreal, light, images of shimmering light, stars, and so much more. And I also struck that I see so many similarities in the themes that you touch on with Vasiliki's poetry as well. And I really find a kindred spirit in your work.
Yes, absolutely. We are kindred spirits. Yes.
Yes, and surrealism is also, and the dream work is part of that kindred spirit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was traumatic how I had to leave Europe in a way, but it was really what it was for me. It was a process of individuation, right? Because as a child, I was very eager to please my parents, and because I could do all these things, it never occurred to me that there would be a point where I couldn't do them. So I was a pianist, I was a dancer. When we moved from Geneva to Paris, I was referred to Maître Sancan, who's a master there, and most of his students really were professionals. This was going to be their profession. For me, it was just something I loved. And then I had been dancing since early on. As a matter of fact, the reason why I started dancing so early was because I started walking too early. And I was just, not walking right because it happened too early. So I was put in dance class to straighten, my legs. And I loved it. I had first a Russian teacher, and then a conservatory in Geneva, and then I was dancing at Salle Pleyel in Paris, and I was part of a dance company. So I found myself a math major trying to still be a pianist and still be a dancer and perform. I performed at the Theatre of the Champs-Élysées, for instance. And I loved languages and literature. And I just got stretched too thin, is what happened in medical school. And I really found myself in a world where I had to give up some of the art in order to stay there, and it became too much. And then that was revisited again because, in a way, it's like some people know right away what they want to be or do. Like from an early age, they have a strong calling. And I do believe that as artists, we're called, right? It's not really a choice we have. And so for me, I wasn't able to listen to that because I was giving into the pressure. Like I wanted to please, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll be a doctor, but I'll be a dancer and a pianist. And I mean, who does that, right? And an actor. I mean, that's really at 17, I was thinking those thoughts, and I came crashing, right? The gift from that was, it was a deeply spiritual experience. And then it was revisited again because, after getting my master's degree, I had to realize that I had to leave. I had to leave Europe to be fully myself because, the pull to remain in academia was just too strong. And so later on, right, I can reconnect with teaching and such. But what's really interesting in terms of how things happen in your life, for instance, when I was in New York, after I graduated from the American Academy, I went to study at the Actors Studio. And at that time, Ellen Burstyn was teaching 2 classes, and that was it. And I was very lucky to get into one of these 2 classes. And she taught it partly at the studio and partly at her house upstate New York. And at the very end of it, because she's very mythical, and so she had put on a table various objects, and she asked each of us pick one, but without knowing what it was, right? And so the one I picked was a dove, a brooch. With I didn't think of bringing it because I didn't know I was going to talk about that as things happen, right? And so a dove taking flight, which is, the title, The Wings of the Dove, of the novel I wrote my thesis on, in terms of, I love Henry James. It's just one of my favorite novels of Henry James too is The Ambassadors. And one of the characters says, live all you can. And so this is really what it's about. You have to live your life, you have to express yourself the way you're meant to. And it doesn't always come easy, and maybe never comes easy to most people, but some people, it seems, have an easier path to it. Mine felt very convoluted, and at first I had a difficult time understanding it. And I think the dream work played a role in terms of, working with your own self and getting answers from yourself. And I think the spiritual element of my life, that was something that stayed with me from then on, because I had another crisis after my master's. That's what pushed me out of Europe, basically. And one talks about faith, and I mention it in the poem. And for me, it's not really that. It was really experiential, where I connected with something else that has stayed with me ever since. And it's true that, the faith part does come into play in the sense that you have moments of doubts, right? Like you at least me, but the sense of like, okay, I'm doing what I'm meant to do is stronger, because it's really what's pulling me. So I do think we are here on this earth to fulfill ourselves, a destiny, whatever it is for everyone, but it's not an accident that we do what we're doing. I think we are meant to be doing it. So it transpires into the poems and the writing. Yeah.
First of all, Hélène, I would like to thank you very much. I was I really enjoy your poetry, and I want to thank all of you, not only the people who organize it, but also people who are here and attending. Many things, have in mind, but I will focus to one or two of them. One is about the dreams, because this is for me also very, very important. And I would like to know, since you have this on one hand the French background and tradition, because the dreams was the basic ingredient for the development of surrealism, and also as a sociologist, the French sociologist Louis Althusser, he did a tremendous analysis of Marx using Freud's interpretation of dreams to analyze Marxism. So this is one part, and how all this play a role to you, this French education you had. And also for me, one of my favorite American poets is John Berryman, and the 77 Dream Song.
Yes.
And I want to know what kind of direction you give to the dreams, because this is the important thing. You have a dream, but how you direct them, and if you write the next day, I mean the morning after, or it has to be somehow sit in first and then bring it up. I would like to hear about the writing process of yours, and also Yorgos will understand my question more, because he's dealing with that. What is your ethnic identity after all? How the Greek background plays a role. You have a very magnificent, complex background. So
yeah, I mean, I grew up with Greek mythology, right? I mean, I was like reading all the Greek mythology, growing up. I'll mention, you mentioned the surrealism, two books that I absolutely love. One is Nadja by André Breton, which is really beautiful. And the other one is Nightwood by Duna Barnes. And T.S. Eliot wrote the introduction to that. And in a way, you can look at the wasteland as being a bit surrealist as well, a metaphor, right? But the surrealist, it's the power of dreams and the subconscious, right? That feeds surrealism, and an element of strangeness and oddness, and a strange beauty that permeates all of that. And what it does, you connect with it in a non-rational, cerebral way, right? It just gets to you directly, I think, to the core of you. You just don't know what it is. It's images, and it's the subconscious, and it reveals without having to analyze it, and you can trust it. So the way I work with dreams, well, when they come spontaneously, I just write them when I can, and sometimes if it wakes me in the middle of the night, I have to write it then, and if I'm too tired or lazy, I can lose them in the morning, and that's happened. Otherwise, when I remember them in the morning, I write them down. When I ask for a dream, for whatever reason, looking for an answer for something, right? I use a formula, a letter that I write, and this is what you would want to use, a letter, and that I learned that way through the dream work that I did, a letter to my inner self. And I ask for permission because I might be asking for something I'm not meant to know, at least at the moment, right? So I start the letter like this. It's short. It's just, dear inner self, if it is your will, please give me a dream tonight that tells me or shows me, and I ask what it is I want to know, right? And then I sign with love and respect, and Hélène, right? And then I see if I remember the dream, because we always dream. we just don't always remember them. It's just what it is. So if I remember the dream, upon waking, I'll write it down. And if I don't remember the dream, then the day is still part of the dream, is the waking dream. So it's all one, right? It's the sleeping dream and the waking dream. And during the day, following the night where I've asked the question, there will be something unusual that day. There will be a surprise. There will be something different that will stick out. And that will be the answer. Because the answer to the question of the dream, and even if you don't have a question, but you have a dream and something is unusual about it, different, that is always the solution. And then you work with it. Yeah.
In what language do you dream? And if the language of the writing coincides with the language of the dream?
Yes. So I dream in the language of the country I'm in. So right now, when I'm in the US, I dream in English. When I travel, and so that's that. Sometimes in the dream, there will be a word in a different language that can come up. For instance, and sometimes in the dream, there will be something new a word that I didn't know before the dream. I mean, Seridwen, I didn't know that Celtic goddess until she came into the dream. I had to look her up. So when, let's say, I go to Europe, to France, there will be a slight delay. Well, the first night or a couple of nights, I'm going to still dream in English, and then it'll switch to French. And what happened to me, my father died in 2018, in July. What happened with my father was the circumstances were difficult for a different reason than with my mom. Because my mom, it was sudden and she was still young. So that was a shock. But I got to spend time with her because when I found out she was ill, I was in New York at the time. I dropped everything and I spent a lot of time with her. With my dad, he had Alzheimer's at the end of his life. And so I had to go back and forth a lot to look after him and to find a way to have him be in a place where he could be looked after properly. And there was a difficult situation around this with my brother's behavior. So I had to do a lot, and I had to also be in Spain, where he has a place, and clean it up and have it ready so I could rent it and have that along with his pension to put him in a really good place where he could be, well looked after. And I was like flying back and forth. Like I made 8 trips in that year. Between France, Spain, and the US. And so what happened to me at one point, it was just so much that I remember waking one morning after coming back to Santa Monica and not knowing what country I was in anymore and what place I was in. But usually when things are a bit less hectic than that, it just takes a couple of days to switch to the other language for the dream. Yeah. and for me, I choose to write in English now because I live here, and English became my language of choice, when I moved to the US. But French is my first language, but English is my 5th. And so my collections are bilingual, as you mentioned earlier. And so what happens is I write in English, and then I translate them into French. And then I revise the original English a lot of the times because I find that it can be improved, because translation is very unforgiving in the sense that if the original text is not very good, it's very hard to translate, right? And so that's the gift of great poetry, is that it's beautiful. It may be difficult to translate, but you have great material to start with. So, the translation should be good. If there is a weakness in the original, it comes up when translating it. So for me, it's been a dance between the languages. Basically, I was able to, I never thought of it. I mean, what happened is my first book, The Astonished Universe, was published by Red Hand Press, and the publisher suggested to me, why not have it as a bilingual collection? And so after that, I did it with the others, and it was worth it because I improved, I improved the original. And this brings up another translation question in terms of like, how faithful or free should the translator be? And for me, I always want to be faithful to the original. I want to honor it, but the idea is that to always capture the essence of the original text, even if you have to make a little change. But I really try to be faithful. With my own, I was able to be freer in the sense that if I wanted to change something, because it's my creation, it's my text, the original is, then I felt in the translation I could change something if I wanted to, which is not something I would do with any other author. And I know some poets do; they take liberties and they're very creative. But even though the translation is a new creation, it becomes a hybrid, right, of the creation between the translator's work and the original text. I still want to be faithful to the original. So far, I've worked that way.
I loved your expression of a dance between languages. So that's why we have also the title Swinging Between Languages. So in a way, diasporic poetry takes on a new meaning with your case. And in that case, you don't have this longing for one lost home, because you don't seem to long for a home, because you seem you are at home in so many languages.
Yes, well, I try.
So you really amplify the notion of diasporic poetry, and you give something new in my own perception of what diasporic poetry is. And here I would like to invite George to tell us something about it, because he also deals with diasporic poetry a lot in a very different way.
It seems that, I mean, the way I listen to your poetry, it seems that your mobility has been immense. It's astounding for me. And certainly that you're inhabiting so many languages is extraordinary. So I was wondering about to what extent and how your poetry helps us understand mobility from your own biographical and experiential perspective.
It really does, and it's really interesting what you say, and I thank you for it, because like I said, I think what my poetry is about healing. And for the healing to occur, there had to be tremendous wounds. And so I touched on it in the beginning. I mean, I almost died twice. And that's what it took for me to have this mobility, to come to the US, basically. So to address, so I'm going to come back to it, but I just wanted to say something about what Vasiliki said earlier about home. And this is really where I've come to now, and it's taken quite a bit of time to really feel like I'm a citizen of the world and I'm at home, But home is always also a wound and an issue, and so I didn't grow up with the foundation of a home that a lot of people do, in the sense that both my parents were immigrants in France at a time when Greece and Spain were not in the EU. And when immigrants from Greece and Spain and Italy were considered, like Mexicans here in the US now. So my mother is 100% Greek, and she had this very, very strong bond and connection to Greece. And she had a very strong sense of what home was for her. And it was also hard for her to be in France as a result of, having left Greece. It was both, something that she wanted to do, and she loved Paris, and with my dad, like I said, he was going to be jailed, and that's how he left Spain. So it wasn't, it was a forced choice to him. That's like, a forced decision for survival. Like I said, my mother's friends were tortured during the colonel's dictatorship. My dad ended working for the United Nations in the Spanish department. He actually, was originally a lawyer and then worked as a translator and reviser, and basically all his colleagues were from South American countries that had experienced dictatorships. So I grew up in a very politicized atmosphere and very, very, very aware of it. And I've healed, the wounds with my own father, because I'm not going to necessarily want to dwell on that. But when I said, I had a breakdown after 2 years of medical school, that was as if that was not enough. My dad felt betrayed that I did not become a doctor, because he really wanted to have a doctor in the family. My middle name is Vanya. I'm named after Uncle Vanya, Chekhov's play. And so my dad took it to heart, like almost like I just did it. Like, I don't know what he really, like, on the one hand, I have no doubt that he wanted the best for me. On the other hand, he just felt that, what was I thinking, throwing away my life like that, by not like finding a way to stay there, and so for a long time, we had a difficult relationship. And I was cut off. When I moved to New York, that was really a move of survival. I didn't have much help at all from him, and it's really difficult to talk about it, because we really have healed that wound, But I was on my own. And I went there with nothing. I struggled most of the time I was there. So the meaning of home for me was always where I could find, in a way, a substitute family as well. So the drama school became my home when I was there. The actor studio became my home. My group of friends became my home. And I was just working all the time that I wasn't studying to survive. I was living in a student house. It was a constant struggle. And I wasn't, the US has opened up a little bit towards foreigners in the entertainment industry. And I am an American now, but even when I became an American citizen, I was still considered not American by a lot of people in the industry. But when I was at the American Academy at the time, there was one Black actor, and we were both considered exotic. So it was never like, I was never in the club, I didn't have the connections. It was not that everything was smooth. There is a reason why poetry can transcend. There is a reason why it heals, and it has to come from having healed the wounds. And my mother was very supportive of me. She was only able to do that much, but her support has meant the world to me. It's like, I would talk to her, and it was kind of just, a way to stay sane at times, because I had nobody. So after she died, and that was in '96, I told my father that I was going to sever ties with him now, because I had no more reason to go back, to Europe. And because I was willing to make that change for myself, he changed. And we became close again, and the whole time that I looked after him, the last year of his life, I experienced the depth of his love, he still knew who I was, and the tremendous love he had for me. And there are so many misunderstandings in life, and in families and in general. And it's not always easy it's always with distance that you can understand what was going on at the time, and that maybe everybody was just doing the best they could and all they knew, and maybe they meant well, but all of this has made me who I am. And so what's at the core of my poetry is really having overcome all that and having been able to appreciate what I was given and what I've been able to make for myself. But I studied with scholarships a lot. I mean, this mobility is just, it was born from a need that I had, which was rooted in survival. So I wasn't at all, yeah. The thing is, you want, if when you read something that's transcendent, the reason why it is, it's just because you've gone to the other side, right? And you can come from the empathy and the understanding and the light, as opposed to I find it not very helpful for me, but everybody has their own way of expressing themselves, and every aspect of expression is needed. But mine, I mean, complaining is just not useful. So that's where it came from. And this sense of home is I think, is always going to be something, that I think everybody looks, that I'm going to keep looking for, regardless of, I find ways to make myself at home. But I think home is really the primordial question for most of us in general, even when it's been easier,
I think your home is the world of imagination, the enchanting world, Hélène. It has been wonderful to share the gifts of healing of your poetry and translation with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if I had if I had been very rooted where I was originally, I wouldn't have left. You know what I'm saying? So I've had to hear all kinds of things. I've had French people tell me that I wasn't French enough because my parents weren't French. Just I've had Americans say that too, even though this is also, like France, a country of immigration. Most of us have had to deal with a lot of that. It's not, it's not unusual in any way. I haven't had to deal with race. I haven't had to deal with having to crawl through tunnels. But making my home here was a long and arduous path. I came here with a student visa, and I had to, first what I did was get what's called a practical training visa, which is a catch-22 situation where after you graduate, they'll give you a job if you have a visa, but you need the visa to get the job. But what I had done is I had done a reading of a radio play that was supposed to be done in New York. It ended up being done in London, but the casting director was also casting on a soap opera, and she loved what I did. And then she had asked me to write about it afterwards, which I could do. And she was very impressed, and I explained to her the situation, that I needed a job to get my visa. And she helped me. And really, what matters really is the people who are there to help you when you need it. And so I got my practical training visa, and I was told by the American Academy at the time that I was the first student who had managed to do that, because a lot of foreign students and going back to Europe, or some get married to an American or different, So, and then I got an H1 permit, I was visa, and that was renewed. And then I got lucky again, because I was asking everybody I knew to sponsor me, and things don't always come where you think. It's like a lot of doors were closed or not opening. And then I did the lottery, and the second time I did it, I got my green card in the lottery. So I trusted that, because I thought I'm going to be here the right way, or I'm just not going to be able to stay here. And that's how I was able to stay. And after, 5 years of the green card, you can apply for the citizenship, which is what I did. So, yeah. And I'm grateful for it. I feel very at home in the US because it's so multicultural, precisely. But at the same time, I'm also very European. And I think it's great, actually. I look at that as a very rich aspect of who I am, as opposed to a lack of not being 100% one thing or another.
You've touched on many things that have also been touched upon with other guests, and so this has just really created a very rich forum. And we had one question. Hélène, if you could give us the reference for the poem on Aphrodite, which collection was that from?
Oh, that's from Dreaming My Animal Selves.
Dreaming My Animal Selves, and what a beautiful title. Well, I want to thank you so much for all that you've shared of yourself and of your journey and of your exquisite poetry. And thank you all for being here with us. And I hope we can be together again soon.